the invasion forces. Firstly, the invasion fleet. This consisted of 159 transports, or ships of various sizes, 1,859 barges, that's after losses due to air attack, 397 tugs, 11 Herbert ferries, 12 Seabull ferries, 1,100 motorboats, 68 command boats, and 5 artillery ships equipped with 6-inch guns. These were to be escorted by 7 destroyers, 13 torpedo boats, actually they were small destroyers, 13 S-boats, 19 M1935 minesweepers, 20 U-boats, 93 Vorposten boats, and 40 round boats. The U-boats were to stand off to the flanks of the invasion fleet and outside major British naval bases such as Rosyth. Most of the invasion fleet was armed, with the invasion barges carrying anti-aircraft guns. The British found it hard to distinguish normal ship and barge movements from movement of the invasion fleet. Also, there was constant activity around the ports as crews trained in using the boats and units practiced loading and unloading. So, although loading and movements would have had to start 20 hours or more before arriving at the beaches, it may not have been obvious that the invasion had started until 4 or 5 hours beforehand. It is likely the fleet could have reached the invasion beaches with only light opposition, but they would have had to deal with ever larger Royal Navy forces thereafter. The Luftwaffe could not interfere with the Royal Navy at night, so the Luftwaffe would have had to bomb the British warships in their ports before the invasion started, or while they were transiting to or from the invasion area. The figures for the invasion fleet are disputed and may have been larger or smaller. The invasion force was to be composed of 35 divisions, including 2 mountain divisions, 4 panzer divisions, 2 motorized infantry divisions, 2 elite Jaeger divisions, 1 parachute division and 1 air-landed division. There were 10 divisions in the first wave, accompanied by nearly 400 armoured vehicles and the Brandenburger Commando Regiment. In the left bottom you can see a Landwasserschlepper amphibious tug, of which only 7 were available, and on the right are Fallschirmjäger paratroops. Providing armour support for the initial wave of assault troops was a critical concern for Sealion planners, and much effort was devoted to finding practical ways of rapidly getting tanks onto the invasion beaches. Though the Type A barges were capable of disembarking several medium tanks onto an open beach, this could be accomplished only at low tide when the barges were firmly grounded. The time needed for assembling the external ramps also meant that both the tanks and the ramp assembly crews would be exposed to close-quarter enemy fire for a considerable amount of time. A safe and faster method was needed, and the Germans eventually settled on providing some tanks with floats, that is the Panzer II Schwimmpanzers, and making others fully submersible, the Panzer III and Panzer IV Tauchpanzers. By mid-September 1940, the Germans had converted over 200 tanks to be used in 4 battalions attached to the first waves to go ashore. Dawn on S-Day. Paratroopers landing in gliders attack an airfield defended by armadillos, British troops, most likely the Canadian Division, and a Bren gun carrier. For the first time, the entire 7th Fallschirmjäger Division would jump together on or around Limpner Airfield northwest of Folkestone. They were to seize the Royal Military Canal, secure the beachhead for the Eastern Assault Group, capture Limpner Airfield, and attack Dover from the rear. The army wanted to spread their attack more widely. For instance, they wanted to take the cliff tops, but the Luftwaffe refused. They would be reinforced by the 22nd Division when the airfield was captured. Although they were going to have to jump without their weapons, they picked them up from their containers after the jump. At least, as happened on D-Day, their pilots weren't going to have to find their jump points in the dark, and they weren't going to be dropped into the sea or flooded rivers like the Allied parachutists on D-Day. They could expect to experience some anti-aircraft fire if they went near Dover, and unless the radar stations were destroyed, they would be landing without the element of surprise. Even if the radar stations were not working, the British would be expecting a paratrooper attack, as they could see the invasion fleet leaving port long before it arrived, and they had broken the Luftwaffe Enigma code. The history of other World War II airborne operations shows that the German airborne troops that did not land in gliders would probably be spread over a wide area from Dover to Ashford, or even further, unless they got perfect weather conditions and little opposition, similar to the initial Arnhem drop. Like Holland and Crete, they would also probably suffer a 70% casualty rate, but achieve their objectives. Some would land in the flooded regions of Romney Marsh, but there at least the policy of not carrying their weapons etc. would mean that they would have a chance of avoiding drowning. The loss of 220 Ju-52 transport aircraft over Holland is sometimes cited as a reason why there would be some difficulty making the parachute drop, and it might have taken 2 days to drop all the troops. However, the Ju-52 wasn't the only aircraft used for such purposes, and the Germans could make up for the missing transports by conscripting civilian aircraft such as airliners, something they did for the Norwegian invasion. If a captured airfield was in need of repair, the Germans could be expected to implement the first of many proposed harsh measures and round up any remaining locals as forced labour to get it fixed as soon as possible. German tanks. On the top left is a Panzer IV-D. On the top right is a Panzer 38T, seen here on the French Channel coast. It was reliable but lightly armoured. On the right is a Panzer Befehlswagen I command vehicle. At least 92 of this and or the Panzer III version were required at full strength. Each Panzer division had 23 headquarters, each of which was supposed to be issued with at least one Panzer Befehlswagen. The 4 Panzer divisions of the second wave would have up to 1,472 tanks, that is 224 Panzer IVs, 400 Panzer IIs and 848 Panzer IIIs at full establishment, but tank production was slow and losses were suffered during the recent campaigns, which could only have been made up by transfers from other units. Each 1940 Panzer division contained 16 tank companies, grouped into 4 battalions, 2 regiments or 1 brigade. The exception was Rommel's 7th Panzer Division, which at the start of the Battle of France had only 3 Panzer battalions. It was equipped with 72 Panzer IIs, 37 Panzer Is and 23 Panzer IVs, and because there was a shortage of Panzer IIIs, it had no Panzer IIIs but 30 to 40 of the Panzer 38T instead. German tank destroyers, self-propelled guns and artillery. The first wave was allocated over 400 armoured vehicles, including 250 amphibious tanks, 20 Flammpanzer IIs, 48 Stug 3s, some Panzerjäger 1s and 81 Karettens. Above is a Panzerjäger 1 tank destroyer. This could be effective against the Matilda. In July 1942, 3 Mark II Matildas were penetrated at a range of 400 metres by the 4.7 cm tungsten core armour-piercing shell Panzer Granit 40. It usually penetrated 60 mm of armour. The 4.7 cm armour-piercing shell, the Panzer Granit 36T, would not penetrate a Mark II Matilda at 600 to 800 metres, but the crew would abandon the tank because fragments spoil off the armour of the inside. Combat ranges of 500 yards or less are likely to have been common in southeast England due to the hedgerows and sunken lanes, so this vehicle may have been an asset to the Germans, although it would have been a matter of who shot first because of its very thin armour. Above right is a Sturmpanzer I Bison. This was a 150mm infantry gun on a Panzer I chassis. The self-propelled heavy infantry gun companies numbers 704 and 706 of these were assigned to the 7th and 10th Panzer Divisions respectively in the Battle of France. As each company had 6 Sturmpanzers, maybe 12 were available for Sealion, and they would have arrived with the second wave. On the right is a Stug 3 assault gun, somewhere between the A or B grade. The Stug 3's frontal armour was impervious to 2-pounder anti-tank gunshot, and its low silhouette made it hard to hit. The Stug 3 was manned by artillery troops and had artillery sights, and with its short 75mm gun would have been a formidable opponent to British fortifications. In total, there are over 2,000 armoured vehicles in the invasion force.